Hi, everybody. It is the 100th Icy Topic Chat. Woo! Can't believe it. We did it. Um, it's just one step along the way, though. I think we'll blink our eyes and it'll be 200. I just know that that's how that goes because we've got some momentum and this is who we are and this is what we do. We meet on Thursdays now. A couple people here might have been part of the original sessions I did as a e-group back in the day, and the history on the IC topic chats is that I was presenting a workshop. Raise your hand if you're part of that group. I can't remember who was in it. But anyway, I was doing these workshops through an e-group through AEA, and we couldn't communicate. It was like this really kind of wonky pre-Zoom kind of setup. And I said, listen, the problem with this thing is I'm just talking to you and you're listening and this isn't the good, we're not communicating. So let's just go through all the material again after this and I'll just do it through my Zoom thing. And so we started that up and that was like, I think May 20th or something like that, 2020. So it was a little over 2 years ago. And we've been meeting ever since with exceptions to like Thanksgivings and Christmas holidays and things like that. Anyway, that's the history. And so we made it to 100. And today, I thought it was appropriate to do something along the lines of resilience, because we've been resilient for 100 sessions, 2 years worth of this stuff. And here we are still going. And we've got this wonderful group assembled today. And we do it. And actually, part of the conversation yesterday when Anne and Kurt and Susan and I were meeting was we wanted to shake it up and do some more breakout rooms. A survey went out, many of you completed it. Thank you for that, about resilience. And I also got some feedback that maybe we should be doing some more connection and less about the big group sessions. So we're going to try that today with some breakout rooms. But we're going to talk about resilience. This is a panel topic. The panel is kind of my collaborators and I, Anne, Kurt Stuke, and Susan Wolf, and I are just going to talk a little bit about resilience and things that we thought about in our conversation. We're going to try and condense our 45-minute conversation yesterday down to 20 minutes, and then we'll break into rooms, and the four of us will take on breakout rooms. Then we'll come back out and see where it goes, and we'll, chat, see where it happens. So with that, Anne, Kurt, Susan, let's talk about the first question, which was why do we need to be resilient? And I know this was a question that you guys you came up with yesterday. So what do you think?
Because independent consulting is not for sissies.
Because consulting really is, there's risk involved, which of course, and also there's ups and downs. It's not like we become consultants and it's constant success and everything's lovely. There are times when, we have our low moments, all of us, I think even the most successful of us.
That was a much softer way of saying it, Susan.
Yeah. That's unusual for me.
Switched roles. All right, Kurt.
For some of us, the pacing of what we do is so fast that we can't afford a long downtime. If you've got a lot of contracts and reports due and proposals due, you really have to be able to bounce back from any kind of difficulty fairly quickly. And I have a huge fear of failure. I just don't like failure. And, when it comes to writing a proposal and you don't get accepted, I got to move on. It's just like, okay, we didn't get that one, go. Because there's another proposal to write or another report to write, things like that. So it's just the pace of our work sometimes is so rampant that we have to be able to bounce back from difficulties.
Yeah, sometimes that's daily even. And we also, no matter what's going on in our personal lives, if we have clients that we're accountable to, it's like, suck it up, buttercup. You got to get this report out. You can't call and say, I'm sorry, this happened to me. Sometimes you can, but there's other times when you just don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Your client really doesn't want to hear your issues or how busy you are with everything else, because I always say they always think they're the only child.
And you have to treat them that way.
Uh-huh.
Too.
That's exactly right.
I looked back at my notes and I used the wrong prompting word in this question. I said why, but the question we put together was when. What are those causal factors?
Yeah, you threw me off there.
Sorry, I'm looking at it and I was like, hey, that's wrong, because you're not answering the same things that we said yesterday. So when are those things? And I'm looking at the notes I made from what you guys said, like nobody beats me up like I do. I think that was you, Kurt. No, that was no, Ann, you said that about yourself. Nobody
That was
beats me up
me.
like I do. And that
Mhm.
I think you need to be resilient to your own inner voice.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the question we actually talked about, and I thought, well, Matt just threw us a new one or something. So we're going to go for it. But the question we talked about was, when do you have to show resiliency? And that's what I said. One of the things that I did when I opened Community Evaluation Solutions was give myself permission to make mistakes, because I can beat myself up all day long, kind of like what Kurt was saying. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of making mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. I mean, most of us don't have MBAs. So a lot of us are learning as we go. So we are going to make mistakes, and the world can't come to an end because you trip up or make a mistake. You got to keep going. You don't have time to be self-indulgent and or beat yourself up. You got to keep going. You got to forgive yourself and move on.
Yeah.
The line, we've decided to move in another direction, is another one of those. It's like the proposal. We've had that from 2 new clients or potential clients, and we've done the due diligence. We've been asking questions and answering questions about the company and our capabilities and all that. And then we get the email. We've decided to move in a different direction.
Oh boy, yeah, heard that one a few times.
It's
I
like
think too, though, there was a time when I didn't feel resilient, and I think it was partly personal. My husband was retiring. I got really scared because I was losing his health insurance and would have to buy some. And it wasn't a time when I had a lot of contracts, and I got scared, and I decided, even though I went ahead and found a job for a couple of years, and that was not the best thing to do. So I think there's a lot to be said for being resilient, but also recognizing that sometimes resilience means moving in a different direction, even if it's just temporarily. The job turned out to be a nightmare because of aspects of the organization, but I did gain some things out of it. So it wasn't like, well, I got a paycheck for 2 years, and it was nice to have that respite. I had to commute, which sucked. But I did learn a little more about the consulting business from a different aspect. I made some new contacts, got some new clients that once my NDA was, or my non-compete was up after a year, I started getting some clients calling me that have been clients there. So, there are times when we may not be resilient and we may move in different directions. The good news is that when I was ready and when the circumstances were right, I came back to my consulting business re-energized and refocused, and with a new sense of confidence.
Now, Susan, how much of that leaving the independent consulting practice and being dissatisfied with I know you were at a not-for-profit, how much of that was the not-for-profit just being a poor fit, and how much of that was, I've done this independent thing for a while and you struggle with kind of the direction that was given to you, you've lost your independence, and you're a fish out of water now that you've been independent for so long?
Well, I think I think I would have been okay losing my independence if there had been a sense of respect and consistency with values. I found that my values were so in contrast with the values of the person running the organization I went to, that, there was all of a sudden, and I mean, the business focus, of course, we have to have it, but you all know that we go over hours. I mean, we guess our hours on contracts. Well, this person actually wanted me to go to very marginal, struggling nonprofits and ask them for more money because we went over a couple hours and things like that. So, that was parts of the independence that we have allows us to, I think, be more consistent with our values. And that is has always been one of the problems I've had in many jobs, is that my values don't match.
Yeah, so some of the other things we talked about, when do you show resiliency, is when the project is not going well, when the client is either not happy with you or not happy with the team. Or Kurt, you gave an example yesterday. I don't know if you want to talk about that, where the person at the client didn't even have an idea of what was going on, like underneath the surface. So sometimes we have to be, and I've used your line about that you shared, Kurt, about what did you say about I'm going in a different direction. I've used that with the 2 or 3 clients I've had to let go in the last 20 years.
Oh, you told them you were going in a different direction.
Yep.
I haven't used it. Yeah, the situation that that Ann referred to is, I got a nasty gram from the PI of a grant, the equivalent of the PI. And he was disappointed that things shouldn't have gone this far. What it was the project manager hadn't been informing him of how far behind we were on things. So I raised the red flag. I was the messenger and I got shot. The message was really to the team, but it was a reply to my email going, this is how far behind we are in this. And all. So it was not a graceful, gracious email. It was written in anger. So the response to that was just, I was pissed, but I blew it off. But that's the next question, or another question. So I won't answer that question yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and Robert put an article for everybody in the chat in case you missed it.
I was pulling up my survey responses because we did put out a survey about that's more specific to the next question, which is how can we be resilient, or what are some techniques for resiliency? And the things that I heard back, and I don't have it up now because you would see it on the screen. I don't want to show anybody's confidential information, but we heard a lot. If there was a theme, the theme to me was community. That independence is not independence, is what I was calling it. It's about creating community with other people, either with your clients or creating community with other people within the independent consulting community, like the ICTIG, and realizing there's a network of people that you can go to and connect with. Maybe it's even former grad student peers that you knew when you were back in grad school or something like that. But those are the things that is the fabric of our society that kind of keeps us going and motivated and being surrounded by people that are equally committed to what you're trying to do. And I thought that was an interesting thing. But maybe I should share the question back to you and Kurt and Susan.
Well, I think those relationships are really important. So whether that be, coming here to IC chats, or maybe you're in a mastermind, but, being in community with other people who are, swimming in the same waters definitely helps me be resilient. I have my go-to folks, most of whom are on this call, that, if I'm stuck or I have a question, or I'm just not feeling so great about myself or the business, I have other people I can turn to. So to me, it always starts with relationships.
Yep.
Yeah, this community has sustained me. I mean, it's not only helped me get started. I mean, everybody was so helpful sharing with me, but also in just supporting over the years, and kind of being there. Some of you have been sounding boards, others have been support. This just coming on Thursday is always a little therapeutic for me. But I think there's also a lot of self-care things we have to think about. I have my dogs. There's physical exercise things people do. There's diet things people do, and engaging spirituality, digging deep Anne's morning walks, but digging deep and occasionally just digging into whatever your faith or something can be helpful as well.
Kurt, you shared something about time in the woods.
Yeah. So when I get cranky, my wife tells me to go ride my bicycle. She kicks me out of the house. So it's either, riding my bike, going out for a walk, being in the woods, just, the neighborhood park that's wooded and see trees and green and all. That's very relaxing for me. And it helps take off, it helps me get centered again. It's like all of reality is not this cruddy part of my job. So yeah, the physical activity, being outdoors, is a big one for me. Another one I thought about is reflecting the causes. So why am I not doing well at the moment? And then starting to address those. So like when this email came back, it was one that I started to think about it from his perspective, the fact that he didn't know, and all. And so it kind of put it in perspective. And that helped me bounce back, thinking about why he wrote that crappy email. So reflecting is a big one.
Yeah, I love that, putting yourself in the perspective of the other person, which is really hard to do when you're not feeling so awesome. But another thing that we talked about was managing your emotions. I'm always working on that. I feel like I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I definitely have times, and I try to like pay attention to what my body is trying to tell me. So if I feel like I'm nervous or anxious, or my palms are sweaty, or I just have that, that fight or flight. Yeah, totally. Breath work. Yeah. And I think that came up in the survey. Somebody had talked about that. So I do that SEAL team breathing, breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, let it out for 4. That has just been tremendous for me. For some of us, maybe you all grew up in the Brady Bunch. I, speaking for myself, did not grow up in a really dysfunctional home. So I need all those emotional, coping mechanisms that I can possibly lean on.
One thing I've noticed about Anne, though, is that sometimes, like, when we've been working together with clients that send these kind of messages like, oh, what do you think that was about? And I've noticed that Anne will, even though she's feeling like, oh crap, what's happening here? She'll still like very carefully construct messages back and get clarification and still move forward without her emotions showing to the client. And I think that's the biggest deal, is that you fall apart in your office, fall apart with your peers, or even just freak out like, I don't know, what did that mean? I'm worried about this kind of thing. And then that's, again, engaging your colleagues and letting your colleagues know that you're vulnerable. I think that us trying to, one of the biggest mistakes we can make is trying to act like we're all that to each other. Like, oh yeah, I'm very successful and everything goes perfectly in my world. I think that is a big mistake. It's okay to sometimes let your colleagues know that your life sucks this week, that you had a bad client experience. We've all had this. I mean, we all have clients that maybe didn't like us or didn't like what we did, or we all have stuff going on in our personal lives sometimes that, maybe medical problems or family things going on, or maybe, what was it I was watching where I was watching Hacks where her husband left her with her sister, stuff happens. So, I think being real with one another and learning to engage in a level of trust with one another. I mean, sure, somebody doesn't want to hear something, really horrifically personal if they don't know you well, because that can be odd, but getting to know one another to the extent where we can share some, I think is super important.
Yeah, another thing we talked about yesterday, sorry, Kurt, I saw you were about to jump in. So maybe this is where you were going. So you tell me if not. We talked about learning something new, developing new skills, or maybe even, finding a new client, something that kind of shakes it up a little bit. So sorry, Kurt, go ahead.
That was not where I was going, but that's a
Oh.
really good point about doing something different, doing something new. Yesterday afternoon, I ended up doing some pivot tables on some data that I could have given to one of my teammates to do, but it was just like I needed that diversion. I needed to do something different right now. Now, I want to piggyback on something Megan just added to the text about cooling off for 24 hours. I have a first part to that is I write the nastygram. I write it either in a Word document or in an email, but I don't put anybody in the two.
Yeah.
I get all the emotions out. I just write everything down as ugly as I possibly can and then delete it. I don't even save it, whether it's in the email or whether it's in a Word document. And then I don't respond for 24 hours or some period of time after it cooled down. So doing that cool off period, like Megan had said. But I get it out first. It's a Word document. It opens up, or a text notepad document, and write it out and then delete it. And that's a critical part, is deleting it so you don't accidentally send it.
Yeah, I would be afraid I would do that.
Yeah, not putting somebody in the two is, I think, the critical thing that you said, Kurt. I've done that before.
One of the thoughts I have is, and the thing I shared yesterday was when my first couple of years, I would take a look at my budget for the year, and I knew what it was going to cost to just be a one-person show for the year and how much I had booked in revenue for the year. And I do multiple year contracts for the most part. So I don't have, I don't regularly work on something's going to happen next month. It's the sort of thing where I build things out and I can kind of see in the future. And I would be in the red for the year, and I wouldn't see it turn to the black, meaning I would be profitable until October or November. And that was always kind of, at first, it was very complicated. It was very hard for me to deal with that. And I had to, at some point, just give kind of confidence, or give way to the belief that it was all going to be okay. And it was. Now, I don't know, that sounds like a terrible piece of advice, because I can't say that for everybody, but it did work out for me. And I realized at a certain point that if I just had confidence, I kept doing what I was doing, things would continue to present themselves in almost always completely unpredictable ways. And it turned out to be okay. And then a lot of things happened since. But that was what I learned through that was I became resilient by being resilient. You build a muscle. You build a muscle by building your muscle. You're not just naturally strong. You have to work on it. And so through time, I grew more confident in what I was doing and realized that things were going to develop, and I just had to be patient with it. That being said, complete opposite end of that, we got into the question of when should you not be resilient? And I think, Susan, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that we all discussed that where we have the privilege of spouses that have sufficient incomes so that we're able to do this. And if things are a little bit tough, there's times when okay, we're going to be okay. But there are times when you just have to be freaking realistic about your finances. And there were many years when I had to work jobs that I absolutely hated and had to hang in there and couldn't do this because I was single and I didn't have another source of income and I didn't have the financial cushion. So sometimes we just have to be practical and we have to hang in there and wait until maybe circumstances in our life change or not. I mean, the reality is that being able to do this job is somewhat of a privilege because you have, the skills, the track record, but you've had the opportunity to build into wherever you are. either because of your personal circumstances or because you've busted your ass and saved a ton of money. And, you know, so I think that there are times that finances just won't allow us to be resilient, and we have to be realistic. You know, and that's okay. And I think the other thing is that we all talk about this being so wonderful and all of that. But if you decide it's not okay, or you have to take that break for a while, I think it's really critical that people know that that isn't failure. That leaving your practice for a couple years or for good and saying, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like feeling insecure about my finances. I don't like, you know, having to have all these responsibilities or whatever it is about it. We should never consider it a failure if we decide this isn't working for me, or this isn't working at this time, or I have to make a shift and I'm going to go get a job. I mean, it's all just career, right? It's all career, and it's going to go, it could go all over. Mine has gone, oh my God, 80 different directions throughout my life. And it all built into this eventually. So be okay with not being resilient if that's your best choice, and if that's the choice, or if that's just the choice you want to make.
Yeah. Matt, you talked yesterday about like a time frame that you advise people, like if you haven't seen progress, and I think you said 6 months. That was kind of your advice that you give to people.
I think I was talking off the top of my head. I don't know that I have an actual mathematical formula or something like that, but if in my mind, if you have a good niche and you're going about, and you've got a community and you're working within it, and you're not seeing any kind of, nothing's developing at all, like you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, after 6 months, you probably should take another look back at your niche. And when I talk about the niche, that I talk about the 3 things that I often talk about in the lectures, which is, do you enjoy what you're doing? Are you any good at what you're doing? And is there money in this field of what you're trying to do? And if those 3 things aren't lining up, you may find there's something wrong. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then you probably don't have that momentum to get up each morning and go try and connect with clients. If you're not good at it, people aren't calling back because you're not qualified to do the work, or your work is not up to par. And if you have the first 2 things and there's no money in it, well, there's no opportunity, and people aren't funding that type of work. And so it's not a sustainable process. I want to go to the breakout rooms, but before I do that, I want to add which has become kind of one of my token things I do, which is my 5.5 reflections. And this is some of the things that we've said already, and some things that I thought about. And so, of course, I like to do a half reflection because, well, that's clever, and I picked it up from a book I read once. But anyway, first reflection I have is, you build resilience by being resilient. This is a practice thing. If you ask a very fast runner how they became very fast, how do you become fast? They say, well, I went out and I ran and I became faster by running. So that's how you become resilient, by being resilient, by continuing to practice this process and encouraging yourself to get up and keep doing this. But I think that's also part and parcel of some of the other things. Independence is not independence, which that means is we are independent consultants. We are oftentimes one-person shows. We're small businesses, but to do this, we can't be lone wolves, right? We have to have connections to others, and through our communications and our peers, through our network, through perhaps this group and other groups like it, through our masterminds. Masterminds, by the way, if you're not a part of, you should be a part of it. I think they start up a new group every fall, so keep a lookout for it, or ask around, and somebody might invite you to their group, which they're kind of self-managed anyway, small groups. Remember your niche. I just described that. Your resilience, if you're seeing you're not developing, you need to think of who you're trying to serve. Are you good at what you do? Do you like what you do? Is there money in this? Is this what's right for the world? Is this niche something that's self-sustaining? And this is very esoteric. It's just kind of ideas, but at a certain point, you are trying to serve a community that needs your services, and you should be able to work within it. And maybe you need to revise your niche, or maybe you need to move on. Remember self-care. A lot of us exercise. Kurt's told to go ride his bike so he doesn't yell at his wife. These are important things. I previously was a marathon runner, and now I do a lot of rucking where I carry a weighted pack. And I end up in the woods a lot. We have a lot of great bike trails in my community, the rails to trails kind of thing. Don't be foolish. It's okay to move on to a better work-life situation if this isn't working. So, life is short. You should enjoy what you're doing. Just because you said you're going to be a successful independent consultant, if you find your quality of life is suffering by trying to be an independent consultant, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, don't be stubborn. You need to go find the situation that's going to work for you. And so this is not just because a lot of us do this and we talk about how great it is, it's not necessarily the right thing for everybody. And so we have plenty of situations, and even Megan, who's here today, we've already disclosed she was independent and she's moved on to a full-time job. And so I'm going to ask if she's comfortable doing that, not now, but in the next group that she discusses that. I see some comments in the chat. I'm not going to get to those right now, but I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll move on to the next stage. Hold on, let me see how I can do that. All right, thank you everybody in the YouTube channel. We'll see you later. Everybody else, stay here, don't go away.